And we are live. Hi, everyone. Hi, Ian.
Hello.
Great to be chatting to you again.
Yeah, I'm curious to know where this goes today because I don't know where it's going to go. I know we had a brief conversation about choices at the end of our call just before we hung up with one another 2 weeks ago. But you've resurrected the idea. You want to talk about the choices that we make.
Yes, I do. I know normally these conversations, and I'm sure we'll put in a little bit of our own personal examples here, but this wasn't motivated from choices that I've been making that I feel conflicted with. It's actually people that I'm having conversations with that they feel conflicted with their choices to the point that part of the conversation was, I don't even trust that I can make the right choice.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, that's 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 something we really need to like articulate a little bit better, because there's no wrong choices in my view of the world, in my perception of how I see things play out in the world. And and I thought, well, if I'm having more than one conversation with people about that kind of idea, then maybe it was worth you and I playing around with what we know or what our experiences are about choices, and the idea of right and wrong, good and bad, and what does that actually mean, and how does that, you know,
Yeah,
impact us.
yeah. I think we have a similar viewpoint on how this is gonna roll out. Because I also agree with you that there aren't any right or wrong decisions. There's just decisions, and you decide. You either make them right or you make them wrong after the fact. They don't have to be good or bad. It's you have the information at your disposal at that time, and you use that information the best that you can, and you make a choice. And if things don't pan out the way that you had hoped, you make a new decision. You choose, you make an adjustment. It doesn't have to be a permanent fixture in your life.
Which is again where I was like, it's about choices, because we feel like we make a decision. And once the decision's made, we're locked in. And then we don't feel like we have a choice to make a different decision.
It's interesting because I'm just thinking of a personal one now. So we and it's been bugging me. So I'll share it. So we recently what's not refinanced, but like renewed our mortgage.
Oh, okay.
and
Radio.
I've and I've never gone with a variable rate. So I've always been locked in. It's secure. You're good for 5 years or whatever it is. It's that rate and it's fine. And I'm like, you know what? Uh, it's I'm gonna go variable this time. We should. I mean, everyone like wins when they go variable because the rate never goes up that much. And within like 2 months of me locking it in for the next 5 years as a variable rate, we've had a bunch of spikes
Uh,
because of proposed recession, increased cost on fuel, like all the whole pandemic.
that sounds so familiar. That is so going on here in Australia.
So I guess over the last little while, I've been beating myself up a little bit about, oh, I made the wrong decision. But really, have I made the wrong decision? And maybe it's gone up 1%. Like, okay, I mean, is it that big a deal? It's still the cheapest loan I'm ever going to get. So I'm not, maybe I'm not locked in. Maybe there's other choices I can make. I could probably go back to the bank and say, what would it cost for us to go and to switch it to be lock it in for 5 years as a fixed?
Or
It's
you
just,
could refinance with a completely different institution and have an option to do fixed then if that doesn't work. There's like multiple
yes,
options.
but I think what a lot of people might get kind of locked in with is maybe it's money, because and maybe it's like kind of like your trigger point. So what's the biggest like motivator in your life? And if it's money and you're worried about making a bad financial decision, you're afraid that if you make that decision that everything's going to tank and everything's going to go south. Whereas there's always a way out. There's always another choice point or decision point where you can make an adjustment and shift something.
Yes, and we often get into this black and white type of things in decisions. Oh, I have to make this decision or this decision. It's like, and where's the third option? Because there's always another option. And yes, it does seem to be that emotions keep us in this caught in the decision. Like you just shared there, that fear, if it's a trigger point, money being a trigger point, or it might be relationships that's a trigger point, and so then you make the wrong decision because you've got all these pre-emotions to the decision that get caught up in the decision. And until you can separate those out, it can be difficult to know what you're feeling about the decision, because you've got all these background feelings that are sitting on top of it.
Muddying up the waters a little bit.
Yes. So it can be really tricky, and we often, and this is where we come back to this, we often feel that a decision is a good decision or a bad decision because we feel it.
Mm.
When really, if we can just give ourselves permission to have a choice, we can make another decision. We can move forward, we can move sideways, we can move over, we can move under. We just have to give ourselves the permission of choice.
You can also reframe the way that you're looking at the choice, the decision that you made. I mean, that was the decision I made 3 months ago, well, 6 months ago, whatever it was. But, I lost my train of thought. I fell off the train. I literally fell off the train. What happened? I lost it. It's
gone. Okay. All right. So the other section of this is that I've just noticed in even our speak here, we keep interchanging choices and decisions.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a distinction between the two?
Well, choice feels much more in the flow. It feels like, I can now make a different choice. So from moment to moment, I can make a different choice. It feels like it's got a bit more movement. Where when I feel like I've made a decision, there's a lot that's gone into it. So something in the reframe for me is whether I'm using the word decision or choice. Now, that might be very personal for me. That may not be actually the true definitions of it, but the way that I feel with my history of decision making, I've made distinct decisions to allow me to move forward. But I make choices every day that lead to better decisions.
Run me through an example of a choice versus a decision for you, because it felt like a choice was more open and more like fluid, and the decision was more final, but I'm not sure I'm quite following that train of thought.
And I'm not sure that has to be true either, but it's my perception of choice and decision. And I think it's clever to look at what the words mean and how we put meaning onto them. So for me, a choice of, I wake up in the morning. So this morning I woke up, I was like, I don't have to start early with all my self-care this morning. Okay, so I've got another hour. So, you know what I'll do? I'll actually get a load of washing on because I've got a weekend that's quite full. So it would be handy if I get that done. So these were choices that I made. And within that choice, then my husband kindly made me my coffee because I'd made this other choice to get the washing started, and he noticed that I was doing something else. So my coffee had already been made for me. So there was movement where now those movements and that choices of how my morning then seemed to play out allows me to make some or feel good about the decision that I've made to make this weekend a very social weekend. Because I've allowed some other flow to start on a Friday morning rather than a Saturday morning. And it allows for the decisions that I was like, right, I've got brunch, I've got a client connection, I've got another lunch on Sunday, I've got an outing with my daughter on Sunday night. So those are the decisions that I'm doing. And then I have choices that help back those decisions up and take the pressure off me to show up for all of those decisions that I've made.
What's running through my head is that decisions seem final. But I don't think that's true. But I think that's maybe the mindset or the mind frame that I have going into something. So maybe what could somebody do where they can take, because it feels like a decision, there's pressure. Like if you make the wrong decision, something's going to happen one way or the other. And if you make the wrong one, well, then you're going to lose an opportunity, you're going to lose a job, you're going to lose money, you're going to lose a partner, whatever. So what would open things up for people when it comes to like taking the pressure off with regards to that?
Well, this is where I reframe it to making a choice. So when I was younger, I had to make some very strong decisions about not having contact with my family. And they felt, like you said, very final. And so I define decisions as being having that finality, where what I do now is I make some choices and I simply have replaced the word. Because for me, I can choose, I've made choices up until this moment today, and then I'm going to make some more choices as I finish this call. What will I choose to do next? And what will I choose to do after that? And I come back into empowerment when I choose. Where a decision feels like I don't have any room to move.
Like that. It feels like when I'm working with clients, I'll talk about like using your compass and using what feels good as your guidepost as to which direction to go. And you're never, like, let's say you're walking through the woods and you have a compass. You can go around the tree. You don't have to walk straight into the tree. You can choose to move around the tree, and then you look at your compass again. You take a look. Oh, okay, now I got off course a little bit. This feels right. I'll go in this direction. So it's a more fluid way of choosing where you go and what you do next. But I like to use your emotion as that guide. So if it feels good, go in that direction. If it doesn't feel good, go in the other direction or in a slightly different direction. And then recalibrate and go and make a new choice from there.
While always checking in with where do those feelings, where are they coming from? Where are they being directed from? Because I go back to the original conversation that made me look at this, where a person said to me, I just can't trust that I'm going to make the right decision. And that so said that she didn't trust her own emotional motivation for making those decisions. And the decisions, even in my perception, it does feel like a decision. If she goes down a particular track, there's a point that she can't make a different choice. It's got some legality involved in it. And so once you reach a certain threshold, you kind of have to keep going on that track. And that feels like a decision rather than her having choice. So sometimes it can feel like once you've locked into that decision, due to other circumstances, there is no choice to back out. Yet, even if the circumstance doesn't feel like you have a choice to back out, you also have a choice in how you feel about that situation.
Yeah.
You have a choice to find a different way of seeing that situation. And this is where I like to come back to choices, because we might go round the tree and it not feel good in that direction. So, but we have a choice to go, oh, well, I'm now going to take the scenic route and feel okay with that slightly off track.
And I think
choice.
I think when I fell off the train, I think that's where I was going. It was regarding the reframe of the choice of the decision that you made. If we can come to the consensus that there's no right or wrong or no good or bad decision, there's just you made a choice. So if you can then look at what did that choice bring to you, what learning could you get from it, what benefit was it by taking the wrong path, to then make a different decision going forward. I remember coaching a young girl who didn't know what she wanted to do for her education. So picking her major or what university she wanted to go to was a big deal. She wasn't sure, but if there's no wrong decisions and you made the best decision you had with the information that you had and went in that direction, after that first year, you could course correct and pick something different. And maybe, but I also believe there's no mistakes. We
there's actual no missteps.
Yeah,
no.
It's like a stepping stone. So it might have been a kind of off track because you wanted that to be your career, but it really wasn't your career. It was to get you the information and the knowledge or the experience that you needed to make the different step or to make the side step over. And so if you can look back at that stuff and reframe it in that mindset, it takes the pressure off whatever choice or decision that you make.
Yeah, and this is where it's a great example of, the teenager looking at what they want to do moving forward. But I also see this play out in relationships where people have got themselves in a relationship that now no longer works. And I phrase it like that because at some point that relationship worked. Now, yeah, whether it was healthy or toxic,
that's different.
Yeah, whatever.
That's totally different.
It worked for those two people at that time. There is a time that it worked. Now, even if it's toxic, there was a win in it for both of them until it becomes...
They're both willing to look at it in that perspective, right?
Right, yeah. So there was something that drew them together that then they need to learn from, even if it was toxic from the beginning. However, there are a lot of relationships that I see people say, well, it was great for the first 18 months, or it was great for the first 6 months, or it was, and then they find that it shifts and changes, and then they start to go, oh, I've made a wrong decision. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't have ever started this relationship with this person because now look at where I am. But
look at the mess I got myself into.
So common. Yeah. And I am very privileged that I do have a very long-lasting marriage and good relationship in that way. But I do find that even for me, I experience that relationship doubt when it comes to clients that I've worked with long-term, because not everybody has a good day every day of the year. So I will sometimes find that I have a conversation with a client, and as much as I want to bring my best version of me, I wonder after the conversation whether I made all the right choices in that conversation. I wonder whether I said the right thing. I sometimes feel like I didn't say the right thing. And then I wonder about the consequences of that and what will be the fallout. And I had that about 6 months ago where I said something that was taken harshly. It was kind of true. It was true. Could I have said it a little less harsh? Maybe. But then when I look with, and I felt like that, and for the first month after that conversation, I felt like, oh, that was very harsh. And now I've created this circumstance where they're not comfortable with me because I'm harsh with them. And now 6 months on, it's not even a thing. Mm. They appreciated the direct truth because it allowed them to do something different.
Now, do you think you made a choice to be harsh, or do you think you were, in the flow and you did what you do based on the best version of you that showed up that day?
Yes, that's the only way that I can look at it. I don't know that I looked at it like that in the first month after I did it, because I did the beat up and I did the run the scenarios. I'm a classic for running the scenarios of how that conversation should have gone. And yet it went exactly as it needed to.
Yeah.
And coming back and having, and I think it goes beyond self-confidence. It's the self-esteem to know that I did the best I could in that moment. And understanding that whether that was 100% the best version of me, well, it was, like you said, in that moment it was, that I could gather right then and there. And so therefore it was the best choice in the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because the best choice in the moment might not might not please everybody, and it might not feel good, right? But
Yeah.
again, you're making the decision with the best, with all the information you have at hand. When I was married and divorced in a previous life, and I got into my relationship with my current wife before I was probably ready, but went ahead with it. And it was a great relationship, got engaged pretty early, and we were going to get married soon after that. And I called it off 6 months prior to the wedding.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And it was my whole body was shutting down. All kinds of things were happening to me, and I knew I needed to get out. And it did not feel good for anybody involved in the situation. However, it needed to happen for me to learn what I needed to learn about myself, for her to learn what she needed to learn about herself, and for us to come back together 6 months after that, and then rebuild from that foundation. And that was a trigger effect for my learning, for me, my coaching business, like my personal growth and development. A whole bunch of things were wrapped up in that decision. And even though it didn't make sense to anybody else, I had to do it. And I don't regret it at all, but it was really hard.
And it can be difficult to move beyond something that feels so almost hurtful, really, and yet look at the great marriage and kids that you guys have produced as a result.
And I guarantee if I had not done it then, this version of my life would not exist. Like it probably would have gone down in a blaze of glory. And I'd be on my third marriage or whatever at some point. I don't know. I'd be the Ross of my area from Friends.
Yeah, we
married,
get
divorce,
it.
married, divorce, married, divorce. So yeah, you can only use what's at your disposal in front of you. And I think that's why coaching is so good, because you're able to get more information, get different perspectives to help support you in making those choices. I think that's what makes some choices or decisions feel so final, is because we don't have enough information to make that decision easy. So we struggle over this way or that way, and if I do this, this could happen. If I do that, like there's a no-win situation. Well, maybe there are some wins in there, but if you had a little bit more info, maybe this would be a no-brainer.
And so I think my ultimate reframe for decisions and decisions I make to go and have brunch. There's no emotion attached to that other than awesome, pick a cafe, hope it's got good food. But there's no emotion behind the decision to go and have brunch.
Right.
Where choices I leave for when there's emotional contribution or emotional effect on others. And so for me, I let there be, because emotions have a natural way of coming in and out. They flow. You know, it's why we often refer emotions to be like water. There's movement to them. And so for me, I leave that as a choice. But the decision is the practical thing. Yep, I'm going to go and eat food. Great. Not really emotional about that. But I might choose to go out to dinner. So I put the decisions more in a practical pocket and allow the choices to be where all the emotions can play. And it means I feel like I've got a bit more free-flowing opportunity to make a different choice.
Cool.
So that's my, I'm fascinated to know how others see decisions and choices and whether they make them the same and interchange the words.
And if
because I noticed even we did that.
Yeah, and if they see them as final, and even in the description that I wrote in the live, I threw decisions in there too. So yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see if people have questions about what decisions they're making, if they can resonate with, am I making a good decision or a bad decision, the right decision, the wrong decision, or can you reflect back on something that you decided or chose and see the value, whether it felt good in the moment or not, so that you can learn from that. Did that decision that I made to go to that school, did it affect me in a positive way? Even though it didn't turn out to be my long-term career, it turned into something else. There's always something that we can learn from our past and help us in making our decisions and choices easier moving forward.
And there's always going to be a feel of good and bad in choices and decisions we make. Sometimes it's about where we focus. So if we get a bit caught up in the hardship, then we just see all of the hardship. But if we can get caught up in the lesson or the goodness or the what feels better, we will see more of that.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that I find makes moving forward and feeling confident in my choices moving forward is what I'm focusing on as finding all the goodness rather than finding the hardship that some of those choices made, which, you know, in my story with a client 6 months ago, I stayed in the hardship for a month before I moved into what really played out for that.
Yeah. There's a purpose for all of it. and I trust that you used your intuition, and even though it came out maybe unlike you, it maybe needed to come out that way for that person to move and to shift themselves. So I don't think there's coincidence in that, but there's definitely learning in there for both of you.
Absolutely. And I had to process through that and see what I could do differently without saying that choice was wrong. Yep. So there we go. That's the choices we make.
I'm glad you chose this topic. I think it was a good one.